miscommunication slash
order at 5:07. And if we could stand for the pledge of allegiance, I am asking everybody to remain standing. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So at this time, before we begin tonight, I would like to have a moment of silence for the members of the Bristol Police Department who were lost or injured as a result of a senseless and horrific act of violence. Thank you, everyone. So in addition, I do want to take the opportunity to just mention that in light of that moment of silence, we really do have many connections between the Bristol and Farmington community. One of them certainly is an important part of that is our police department. So we are also, I'm sure all of us feel the same. We are so thankful for our own members of our Farmington Police Department, and we really hope for their continued safety as well. So something to keep in our hearts and minds. All right, so we will go ahead and move on to public comment. So per usual, we are in hybrid meeting this evening, which means we offer both in-person and online public comment. It's not look like we have anybody in person with us this evening, so we will open up online public comment. If you're interested in providing comment, please raise your hand, and Devin will make sure you're unmuted to speak.
Not seeing any hands. I think we're all set.
Excellent. So we'll move right on to item D, which is minutes. Could I have a motion to approve the attached October 12, 2022 minutes? Motion. All right, any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Online, folks. All good? Yes, okay with that. All right, all opposed? All right, motion passes. We'll move on to item E, which is correspondence received 10/8/2022 to 10/17/2022. We have nothing included in our agenda packet, but again, we let our community members know this is a great way to stay in contact with us. On our homepage of our website, there is a contact form at the bottom. Any questions, comments, thoughts, please send them into us, and we will certainly respond with a thorough answer as soon as we possibly can. With that, we will move on to item F, which is reports. We are going to move through these pretty quickly tonight as we have some pretty significant agenda items in new business, but just a quick mention in the chair report. So again, I appreciate everybody's attendance tonight, being flexible on timing, possibly tomorrow. We'll see how our conversations go this evening, but you know, in light of the information we're going to receive tonight, there's going to be a lot of conversation, a lot of really good dialogue on next steps with all the information at hand. So I just want to make sure everybody's open to having those conversations, questions, comments, thoughts. We want everything on the table, so we really are encouraging good discussion tonight. So I think it's going to be a great conversation for us to have, and you know, lots to learn, I think, tonight. So with that, we're going to move right on to town council liaison report.
Nothing to report other than our next meeting is Tuesday, October 25th at 7 p.m.
Right. Any questions for John? All right, Board of Education liaison report.
Yeah. We had a long meeting on Monday. That was very productive, but nothing for this committee here. And I have our next meeting memorized. So that's it.
Anything else about you? Any questions? All right. Chris Fagan unfortunately could not be with us tonight, so he would normally be our 1928 building committee liaison report. representative, so we're gonna move on from item 4. Number 5 is owner's rep report.
So, the past couple weeks, they've been working with ONG and TSKP to kind of comb through the bid results, and attending scope reviews, and ONG's gonna provide more input on the bid results that they're on tonight.
Any questions for CSG? All right, we will go right on to architect report.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So our office, primarily Archana Pai, who has been spearheading the scope review meetings with ONG and CSG as well, particularly the more critical trades that I see that's in the agenda to be discussed later. So nothing else to report.
So we'll go right on to construction manager report.
Yeah, so we'll be providing more information during the new business, but we'll be going over the bid results. We've completed the bidding process to date, and we'll be looking for a motion to approve critical trade packages moving forward to keep the project moving.
Questions for Laurel? All right, communications subcommittee report. We actually haven't met recently, so there's really no report out for that subcommittee. So that leaves us with financial report.
So financial report, you have an updated report on the spot. The only additional expenditure that we had was for a legal notice for the bid advertising in September. So that was $354.80. The only recent expenditure in that account, not to the project.
Any questions for Kat on that? All right, so we're gonna move right into new business for this evening. In kind of looking at having a really thorough conversation here, I think the first thing I'm gonna do is ask for a motion to actually combine item G1 and G3 on the agenda. So that's actually the order of the conversation. I think that makes most sense now that we're taking a look at what's there. So just so everybody's clear, so G1 is to review the results and discuss the potential next steps. And G3 is to discuss and approve a recommendation to town council regarding next steps. So those two things kind of go in together, and then following that would be G2, which is to approve the award of the following critical trade packages at the respective base bid amounts. So that should follow right out of the conversation we have for this agenda. Does that make sense to everybody? At least what we're putting on the table. So if I could get a motion to do that.
So moved.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so motion passes. So we're gonna move right into new business then, so. Let's go ahead and that's the motion, right? With the two combined, Kat, and I just start putting it in that way?
Yep.
All right, so could I have a motion to review the bid results and discuss the potential next steps? And also to discuss and approve a recommendation to town council regarding those next steps. All right, so we're going to open this up for discussion. We have some slides here that we're hoping was going to help facilitate this conversation as we move through some of the details here. So why don't we go ahead and start? We're going to set a little bit of a stage here just as a reminder for the building committee. We've had multiple meetings now, if you remember, where we're kind of thinking about going out to bid, waiting for bids, and here we are. And to the point where we have the information we need to move forward and make some next steps. But let's think about some of the work we did from a pre-bid perspective. So remembering back to the value engineering exercises that we did at several points in the project to take a look at what the scope of work was, what the cost estimates look like, and how we're always reaching back to that balanced budget. So a lot of work, if you remember, at that schematic design and schematic design and design development and at the construction document point to do value engineering and really try to keep ourselves within budget, which is obviously one of the main responsibilities of our committee. So keeping that in mind, that was a very large part of the work and effort being done to date. What that resulted in, if you remember, was that value management grand list. If you remember at our meetings, we had that entire list of all the items that were at least evaluated for value engineering. Some of those were approved, some of them were not. We had a few that were deferred that we had to make some additional decisions on later, but it did get us to a point where we had this value management grand list. And it helped us, as that statement says, accurately track what we were including or excluding in the project, and understanding what that meant to us moving forward. So through that, keeping those two things in mind, that process and what that end result was, that bottom statement is really important for us to understand in context as we move through our discussion tonight. So through the VE process to address the increased cost of estimates, $9,400,000 was cut from the project before the invitation of bid was released. So that was the efforts of all those that work above. That was the culmination of that grand list and the estimate of those items on that list. So to that point, these reductions do not include alternates. So if you remember, this was a very distinct discussion we had on value engineered items that were removed from the project budget permanently. And then we had items that were like, these, we would really like to have these still in consideration, which allowed us to go out and still get a price on those items and take it into consideration once we understood what our overall budget was, right? So two very different things. Getting to, and Laura said something great to us earlier, was it was really kind of, there are two ways or methodologies or what was the exact word that you used?
Yeah, I'm gonna remember that.
They're methods, right?
They're doing the same purpose. It's to try to track, keep the designs within the budget as the designs for.
Right. But they work a little bit differently. So this was kind of our view from that value engineering list and that grand list. And what that does now is bring us to the next slide, I believe, which is a reminder of our current alternates. So that second piece of the puzzle, which was, here's all the things that we went out, we understand the costs associated now, and now it's back it's in consideration. It's not included in the budget right now, but could they be? And we'd like them to be. How do we make that happen? So this was the alternates that we had and have discussed, I think, multiple times in our committee meetings. There should be nothing here that we haven't seen before. As you can see, so it's the alternates that you see. There's a little bit of a skip there. Oh no, 1 through 8, 9, 10. Now we're good. And then the separate bid package at the bottom, which is the tennis courts. You remember we handled that just slightly differently because the timing of that and how we thought we could best incorporate that back into the project was putting those tennis courts out as a separate bid package. This all look familiar to everybody? What our alternates were and understand how this differentiates from the value engineering grant list. Yes? Okay. So two things to keep in mind before we actually, I'm going to hand it over to O&G to kind of talk to us a little bit more about the bid results, but kind of sets the stage in the context of the work we've done to date and what that means as we learn new information. So Laura, I'm going to ask you to kind of give us a little bit background of just another reminder. It's good for us to hear about the bidding process, and we'll get some more details on numbers.
All right, so just to remind everybody, we did go out to bid August 31st. We had held our pre-bid meeting. As the bidding was progressing, we were issuing addenda. Some of them were design clarifications or scope clarifications. Others were to extend the bid due dates for some of the trade packages. And you're going to see how we ended up bringing the trades in, the bids in at 3 different dates. And then since the very first bid opening, which was on October 6th, we've scoped all of those particular trade packages so that we'd be prepared for tonight to the critical packages. We've scoped all of those in preparation for tonight's meeting. So we fully vetted those numbers that we're looking for tonight. But that was basically the process. So the following bids, those are the critical trade packages, but those were received on the 6th. And there's one more that's in the next group. So those were received what was on the 6th. The next bid opening was held on the 12th. Of those, general trades is still highly critical. It's just that we needed to make a last minute clarification. So we ended up extending their bid, but we have scope reviewed that particular trade package as well. So you'll see that there's quite a large majority of bids came in on that particular day on the 12th. And then just this morning, we finalized the last few remaining trade packages. And again, the reason for the extensions were as we're making last minute changes, the bidders had to try to keep up with manufacturing pricing and whatnot. So that's the reason for the extensions. And in total, there was 35 trade packages. Again, we've received all the bids for all the trade packages as of this date. So as a result of where we stand, this is a result of where we stand. You can see that the original budgeted construction value was $115,600,030. With our apparent low bidders, again, I mentioned I had scoped everybody that we received as of the 6th, as well as general trades. We have more work to do. But the apparent low bidders, so we're carrying those numbers, is $121,531,997, which is leaving us a shortage, if you will, of $5,931,967. I would like to just clarify that I had mentioned there's 35 bid packages. Four of those bid packages, we only received one bid. So O&G will be strategizing with design team and CSG to potentially rebid those 4 trade packages, because we don't know what that number really represents. It's not a true market value. So we will be looking at, is there a scope issue? It will certainly be drumming up more interest, maybe the way that we package it. So this is representing those, and I'll consider them higher bid amounts is in this total. Now you want me to?
I can walk through these. We just go back a slide really quickly. So this is the first time that we're looking at this number as a committee and understanding what this means to us. Before we actually kind of have a conversation about this, the professional partners, just kind of, I would love to hear just some thoughts on some of the reasons behind this number. I think we all are aware of us sitting here, all of us understanding the environment we're in, the economic environment, but from your perspectives, why we kind of are sitting here with this number in front of us now at a high level.
Well, we tried to anticipate the escalation, right?
Yeah.
We tried to.
Yeah.
Our estimate was done several months ago, which is what everything was based on when we last checked. So it's a reflection of the market right now. When we went out to bid, there were other projects that we were bidding with at the same time. So it's not that the project was unattractive, but we had quite a bit of competition while we were bidding. And that's also why I kind of want to hold off on those 4 single trade packages, because I want to get past, there's still stuff on the street. So we have the flexibility. We can wait a month before we go back out. So I think it's just a combination of, it's really just a reflection of the market. It's not really anything that is beyond, it's what's in the project. It's just reflecting what the project
What those costs. Yeah. Does that make sense to everybody? I mean, I think it shouldn't come as a surprise. I think we were hoping that maybe we could catch some headwind somewhere. And I think everybody's feeling this in a lot of different areas, even beyond us. But I just wanted to make sure we had that conversation and everybody kind of understood some of the conversation we're having tonight and why. So
And we are seeing these numbers kind of across the state, not only O&G, but other CMs, other owners reps. It is a kind of something that we're seeing that's indicative of the market right now. We're seeing the 3 to 5% overages on most of the bid packages. I think one of the other things that I don't know if Laura mentioned, but the state is busy again. I mean, the contractors are busy. For instance, we had 2 structural steel contractors bid our project. We expected 4. And then talking with the guys that did not bid the project, they just said their shops they're flat out. They're subbing work, outside of their plants to have steel fabricated that they normally would do in-house. So again, it's really a market condition that's really driving these numbers right now.
any thoughts or questions on that?
I was just going
Yeah, Richard. Oh,
to
yeah,
support what Mark said, that we're seeing this in all sectors. And even the state has questioned some of the projects that are out there, what their experience has been. I think the state is even receiving the same kind of information, the work being done by other contractors, other designers. It's just a phenomenal situation that we're in.
Yeah, I would echo that as well on CSG side and the experience that we're seeing on all of our projects. A lot coming back out, just been out to bid and coming back in that 6 to 10% increase range, all had been estimated right around the same time this project was last estimated as well. So it really is a marker of industry change. We worked really hard as a professional team to do scope reviews, hoping we might find maybe things were carried twice in bid packages or things like that, but there was just nothing that we really could uncover of any real change value.
So if it's usually 10% over, this relatively, I guess, lower than, you know what I mean, as far as the overages, what
It's
is,
not usually 10% over. That's not usual. That's not a lot.
I'm just, when we're kind of communicating with the public, we want to get a sense of, are we trending in the same?
Or less than that.
Well, I think a better question is, we are seeing greater deltas between budgets and bids than we received here.
That was that's what I was hoping.
Yeah,
I was kind of like,
not that we're happy with these results,
No,
but
no,
we are.
right,
And there is a similarity between the packages that are having the overage and the packages that we found having the overages. So we are trending with all our other projects, as Mark said. Certain packages are difficult, they're having longer and longer lead times. The electrical package is one.
Right. We're over here.
The team scoped for a very long time to really map out getting the material when needed for the project. And the lead times that they're getting from the manufacturer are double, triple what we would have seen a year ago.
Right.
So those things are reflected in the risk that the contractors are taking, guaranteeing delivery on time and what they're gonna have to do to get the. As Mark said, we're not happy with the number, but we've been dealing with worse discrepancies on other projects.
Can I ask a probably dumb question?
No.
I know we were scoping the different packages at different phases, kind of like what you just said. Is this the total potential overage? Can this get worse as you continue looking at it? Or is this?
No, this is not gonna get worse. This is actually considering the single bids. And we're hoping to gain, if we do go back out and rebid them, we're hoping to gain some savings there. But that'll be a couple of month process. It's not something that's instantaneous. We have to take a hard look at it.
And
Yeah,
that's
those trade packages wouldn't impact the start of construction.
one of the benefits of bringing the design team, the construction manager, and our own team together is managing that risk. And that's why we're all nodding our heads. That is the extent of the risk from the packages that we've got.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we've been talking about it in smaller groups and, different phases and things. So it's, we're at the point of everything we know and what everything looks like for construction costs. And this is where it's at.
And one thing I do want to point out, though, that the risk that we're talking about tonight can change if we do not approve the critical package that we're going to present. Meaning that if we don't award contracts tomorrow or Laurel doesn't award them, we may have a contractor or two that backs out from these numbers. We have one contractor in particular, steel contractor, that says he can't hold this number any longer than a week. So it is critical to keep the project on the same basis, progressing now and that we start construction, in a very short term here and stay on schedule. So
I think that's a nice transition into our next slide here. If everybody, that's the first time we've seen that number. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that in context, all the work we've done, where we are currently. And so now that leaves us with a question is what next, right? What do we do? So the first thing I want to get off the table, there's some options that you're going to see, and we're going to talk about these in detail. But the very first one, as Mark just pointed out, is schedule. It's not even on here because there really is no option for us on schedule. The bottom line is what we're hearing is that, we can't shorten it. We're going about as fast as we could possibly go at this point, and there's we can't compress anything at this point. And lengthening of the schedule in any way is of no benefit to us either, because it's only going to cost more to the project over time by lengthening our project schedule for a lot of different reasons, for things like that, holding numbers, or just overall escalation right in the project if you're gonna push dates out. So I just want to make sure we put that on the table, something to keep in the back of your mind as we talk about our final agenda item tonight, which is the approval of those critical bid packages and why that's important for us to do this evening so that we can keep the project on schedule. Is that part? Oh, Suraj has his hand up. Before, does that make sense to everybody from a schedule perspective? We're not going to go into that more deeply than that, but. Suraj, you got a question?
Yeah, just a question regarding the one of the, I think, the vendor who said, there's a deadline for us to approve. Now, my question is there a second competitive bidder who we can go to and ask them, okay, can they meet that or lower the price and then give us some leeway in time? So why would we have to stick with just one vendor who's making it a critical path for us to make a decision?
That's not the case for the critical packages we're going to approve this evening.
No, I think to my point was the structural steel contractor, who was the one that said could not hold this number. If out of the project at this point, the next guy is over $1 million higher. So again, it's in that
No,
risk.
Can we not call the next guy and say, can you meet the price? And if they meet or lower, they can get the bid. I mean, what's stopping us from asking them, say, they can come lower?
In public bidding, the rules of the process that we're under, the requirements of the bid need to be defined prior to receiving the bids, and post bid, you can't change the requirements without rebidding the job. So that's not an option that we could do. We could throw out all the bids and rebid, but when you're dealing with a budget deficit, rebidding is just going to constitute, on any of the critical packages, more time, which is then going to translate to a bigger budget deficit. A lot of the packages that we met with have deadlines to get into the manufactured slots so that we can actually receive our products when we need. And that's why ONG isolated the 8 packages that have translated into 7 contracts, because of the lead time of the materials and the time it takes to get a manufacturing slot. So that's just not an option under the public bidding laws. And then just to bring the schedule discussion, this whole project has been laid out so that the main high school can be occupied on time, and then the demolition of the existing buildings, and all of those time slots have been procured in the bidding. So by not starting on time, all of those time slots that are 2 years out would change, and that would change the criteria that the bids will put in. So the basis of bid you can't change without either incurring a change order or violating the bid process.
Did that help, Suraj? Just sounds like the process for public bidding is different than.
Can we ask them to rebid only that critical path? Just the subsection of the package? Because since they already know the scope, it shouldn't take much longer for them to rebid.
If we rebid the structural package, the bid information is now public because it's publicly open. And the low bidder is $1 million under the second bidder, of which they're all well aware of. So you would potentially end up with new bids that were higher than the bids you already have. And the low bidder is honoring his bid. He's a contractor that the professionals have worked with on other projects, and we're comfortable he can do the job and did the scope review, but we would lose that $1 million savings over the next bidder in another bid process. And the other Connecticut-based companies or companies that bid in the Connecticut market have already voiced to us that the reason they didn't bid, they didn't have a slot in their manufacturing cycle to get the steel here when we need it. So the market has spoken and we're sort of, if we want to start on time and erect steel on time, we have to proceed with the contractors that have responded.
Does that help, Suraj?
To some extent, I'll let it go. I mean, I still feel for it because we are 2 years before we are talking. A lot of things can happen to delay between now and then, right? So we are in the beginning. If we have to squeeze out the price, we have some leeway here. That was my thought. Because once we bake this in, then we are baked with the cost. So, you know.
All right. Okay, so let's move on to kind of a discussion around each of our options or what can we do? We're gonna kind of walk through each of these one by one and have a conversation. If you remember now, we've got our bid results. We're gonna have this conversation and ultimately that second piece of the motion that we have on the table is what are our next steps there and what are we going to go to town council with as far as our recommendation to move forward based on the information that we have, right? Everybody good? Okay, so option one is a discussion on utilizing contingency and or FFP to cover costs. Option two is a reduction of project scope. And option three is going back out to referendum to ask for more money to cover the overage, and we'll have some conversations on what else possibly that could mean for us as well. All right, makes sense to everybody so far as we're moving through this? All right, so let's go right on to option one. Okay, so this is a discussion on utilizing contingency and our FFP to cover costs. Just some thinking here to help the conversation. And I do want to make sure everybody asks questions, understands, so please jump in as we're discussing this. But you know, obviously utilizing this option or pulling this lever of actually using the contingency FFP budget is going to allow us to cover that 5.9 million overage in base bid with dollars that we already have but that are allocated someplace else right now. But there are some significant cons around this issue that we need to consider. So, you know, that's not the intent of those dollars, certainly, and I think we would all agree it's really not responsible for us to compromise the contingency budget this early in the project. That's usually for unknown risk and costs moving forward, and this is addressing something we don't right now. So, and the cost for FF&E would need to be covered in the town's capital budget in the coming years with no reimbursement. So think about that. It doesn't eliminate the need for the FF&E. If we take the cost away, we've got to pay for it somewhere. And if it gets pushed into the town's capital budget in the future, not only is that harder to manage, certainly, but it also leaves us exposed with the fact that that does not receive any state reimbursement, which the dollars we have right now allocated to. That makes sense to everybody? Some of you jump in if I don't say something correctly, as I'm walking through this. A lot of smart people in the room, so if I'm not reflecting it correctly, please let me know. And a big con here that we need to discuss is what this would do for us is it would get us back to base bid only. So what we know the project should look like right now, and with no alternates included, no tennis courts. Those are kind of the heavy hitters for us as far as the overall project scope and what we've discussed as really critical parts of this project. So although it would help us cover that overage, it still keeps us short of the project that the community really stood behind. So we're really kind of looking at pulling this lever of utilizing contingency and kind of reallocating those sides is really a high risk, high financial risk to the project overall. Yeah.
Could you remind everyone what the FF&E budget is and the contingency budget is?
Yep, I'm good. I think FF&E is somewhere around 5 total for 900 wing and the high school, and contingency is around 6.
So this option basically says, take that combination of what that's 11 million.
It's closer to 6 and 4, Richard. So it's closer to 10. But yeah, go ahead.
If you take that $10 million, you could spend some of it now to take care of that overage of that's 6 million. Let's call it 6 million, leaving only 4 for contingency and FF&E. And that's why you said, it is risky
It's very.
to have such a low contingency and not having enough money for FF&E, having to spend it later. I get it.
And technology is included in that FF&E budget as well. So it's not just the furniture and the pictures, it's technology.
That is correct. Yeah.
That's helpful. I do want to make sure that we're having a conversation about this. Does this make sense to, it's a lot to take in. I want, maybe if you're like me, you want to hear it all and then kind of assess what, so, I won't be offended if people don't want to ask questions along the way. I completely understand. Let's have the full conversation and then once we have all the information on the table, have the discussion. But does this one make sense to people as far, it is an option, but that's pretty high risk for us from a project perspective. Yes. All right, so let's move on to option 2. Oh, see, I'm sighing. That first, even the review, the review of that first page of the presentation reminded us of all the work that we've done to date around this, but it is an option. It is an option to further reduce the project scope. I wholeheartedly believe there is no pro to this option. I can't think of one as far as how this would be beneficial to the project at this point to reduce the project scope. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the cons. Based on all that work we've done, that grand list, looking at alternates is not guaranteed. I think we can all agree that further cuts are going to put us into that category of that first bullet. We're going to start talking about really seriously impacting educational programming with additional cuts on the table. The significant con is one of the main tenets of this committee that we say all the time, at all costs, protect educational programming. It's why we're doing what we're doing. So significant concern and a con to this particular option. And as I mentioned, we've already done those approved reductions totaling 9.4 million. It's not that we haven't gone in, sharpened the pencils, taken a look, what can we do? How do we keep this within budget without impacting education? What can we do? And I think we've done a good job. And I think testament to the fact that some of that gap is smaller for this project because we have been so diligent in our process. To really keep us within that budget. So, and I hope you all agree with this budget, with this bullet. Cuts have been beyond the committee's comfort level to date. I think nothing that we've cut, especially when we look at some of those alternates, the tennis courts as a separate bid package, it's uncomfortable. Those are uncomfortable cuts for us to make. And additional cuts would be detrimental. And then this is one that's interesting and we need to consider is additional items cut from the budget. So if we are looking at reducing scope, will need to be included in capital budget in the coming years without reimbursement. So again, similar to what we talked about in option 1, the need doesn't go away if we cut it, right? If it's a need, if it's something that's required and really is important to the educational program or something that we need to make sure that we're moving forward, that need doesn't go away. We have to cover it somehow. And so I think it's something for us to keep in mind. And then once again, by doing this, by what we'd be doing again, by reducing project scope, is getting us only the base bid only. So again, there's no alternates included in there. There's no tennis courts included in there. We're seeing a different project than what the community actually saw at referendum. So with all that being said and nothing in the pro column, I think it's pretty clear that again, we're sitting at a pretty high risk level for this. More along the lines of impact to education, potential long-term costs for the project. Makes sense so far. So quiet. Okay, all right, so let's go on to option 3. So option 3 is actually referendum. So let's take a look at the pros of referendum. And what's interesting there is that there really are no cons. to going back out to referendum to the project. But let's take a look at the pros. Referendum would allow this project to utilize additional state reimbursement. So something we haven't talked about yet in this conversation is an understanding of the additional reimbursement received from the state, that bump up to the 30%, and what that meant to us. And if you remember, when that first happened, we had a lot of conversations, what does that mean to the project? And it really didn't mean anything to us at that point, because we are committed, as we should be, to that top line $135.6 million number, right? You can't spend any more than that, the way that we sit here today. Going back out to referendum would allow us to start to think about utilizing the dollars that came from the additional reimbursement against this project, which I think is important for us to consider in our decision making, and something I think that we have to be really clear and transparent when we're talking to the community about what that means and how that fits into the overall approach moving forward, if this is our selected option, but something that I think is an important part of the conversation. And also in this option, we have alternates, which to this point, we haven't considered this. Alternates could be accepted to return the project to what was approved at the first referendum. So here's an opportunity for us to not only cover our overage, but now represent a project that really is closer to the project that the community saw at the point of referendum, the original referendum. Those pros make sense to everybody as we walk through them. Yeah, and cons, and it's an interesting way to say, this is a tough one to swallow. I'm the first one to say it, to say as a committee, it's tough for us to say, but I think it would almost be irresponsible at this point for us if we didn't think this was an option for us, right? To go out and say, based on everything we know today, this is an option for us and a lever for us to pull, is to ask for more money from the community. So a note on this and something to consider in the total conversation is there is a possibility if we choose this option that the referendum could fail, right? We're asking the community their opinion on do they think that those additional funds make sense for this project? So I want to make sure everybody's clear on this. If the referendum fails, additional cuts would have to be made. So it's not that we're stopping the project in any way, we're not doing anything, but basically we're going to have to go back and take a look at options 1 and 2 and say, now what do we do with options 1 and 2 to help us just cover that overage at that point? It's something for us to consider, and I think it should be part of the conversation. We have to, it's really, as I said, it's really a low level risk for the project. It's something I think that is important for us to consider. It gives us those project benefits from the original state funds. So I think that's a benefit for us, and it does get us closer to that original view of the project community.
So to be clear,
Yeah.
The state gave us additional reimbursement knowing that the market is volatile and that everybody's seeing cost overruns, but we cannot tap into that money without going back to referendum because of the way that the referendums work and the way the questions work. Okay. So if it failed, we would basically be stuck to that original number.
At
And we would have to
1.96.
come.
And to piggyback on that, isn't that true? Isn't it true that that could be something very specific to our community and our town and kind of some of the ways it works? I mean, in another town that they be able to, excuse me, access that money without going back to referendum.
Well, we're only authorized to spend 135.6 million
Question.
because that's what was
That
approved at
specific
referendum.
question.
And that would be the same in any other community, what they're authorized to spend. So with the project, no, we have overages, we can't go over that 135 without going back out. Right.
But we're not going back out to referendum without additional funds.
Correct.
They're kind of targeted.
That's
to
part of the
project,
message.
but- Right, like just for communications.
Yeah, it's gonna be, right.
Well, we've done a pretty good job of that before, and had a lot of community support. The other two, the project doesn't look like what we went, got approval for, that's a tough stuff.
Okay. So we're gonna well, this is it. This is the information we have in front of us, opened up for conversation. Our goal here, I'm gonna make sure we get, ask our online participants as well, to make sure that they're okay and have any other questions. But, remember, review the bids, understand what our options are, and then talk about as a building committee, what kind of recommendation we want to move forward with. That's where we're kind of sitting as far as motion is concerned. But Suraj and Michael, any questions or thoughts from you? Right
So
now?
are we gonna make a choice on these options today, or is there a different forum for that?
That's tonight. Suraj, that's.
Okay.
Yeah,
my,
it is.
my only suggestion is, if we're gonna, if the option is 3, I think one of the things we should consider is, if the referendum fails, what aspects of the project will be canceled, right? People should know thoroughly, what attributes or aspects of the building will have to be canceled if this additional request that is being made through referendum doesn't pass, because that's so that the community members can make that decision with clear-eyed and understanding of what's at stake, right? So because the reason I'm saying that is I think I heard, if it fails, then we have to come back and make some cuts. But I think we need to put what those cuts would be right in front, along with the referendum decision making, whatever the process is. If they're not going to get, just as an example, tennis courts, if they're not going to get this, this is what is at stake. We have looked at everything. These are 5 or 6 or whatever those elements are, would be at stake. Because just asking, we have to still figure out what should be cut. I think then we would come across as not fully prepared and looked at, because that would also create a thought in some people's mind that, we have not looked hard, as for finding savings or some kind of opportunity. So all of this should be on the table if you're going to go with option 3 for them to look at.
So I can take that. So the short answer is we'd have to go back and look at it, just like we did in the first 3 or 4 processes of what we thought was a priority, or not a priority, but what we thought we could stomach. Some examples could be the improvements to Monteith Drive, and then the traffic patterns that would, that we wouldn't get the benefits of. It could be granite curbing, where you're adding more to the capital budget every year for the town to fix it versus the granite curbing. So we have items that we've discussed along the way, but there would have to be a whole nother set of discussions with this committee to kind of dive back in and look at every option. And yes, communications with that, Suraj, I agree with you, to kind of lay out some of the things that could be affected, because until we do that work, we don't have exact answers.
Yeah. But to your point, Suraj, I agree. I think from a communications perspective to community, it will be the first question we are asked, and we need to be prepared to answer that to the best of our ability as we're going out, if this is the option we choose.
I agree.
Just a question. So what's the timeline looking if we go out to referendum?
Wow, Monday.
Well,
It's
if
like-
I look for the next slide. Just wait for the next
So
slide.
again, I know I want to continue the conversation and make sure everybody understands 1, 2, and 3 and options, but a logical next question is, if option 3 was to be chosen, what would it look like? So go ahead, Devin. So this is what it would look like. So consider, do you want to?
Yeah. Considerations that were made in creating this timeline. First is bids are only held for 90 days. So that brings us to roughly early January of 2023 until these bids expire. We also had to consider our town charter, where whenever we have a referendum, there's a town meeting 10 days before. So that kind of backs out your schedule a little bit more. And then there's the upcoming holiday season within those 90 days. So what the thought would be moving forward, if this is approved tonight by the building committee, would be to go to town council with the recommendation to their meeting next Tuesday, October 25th, and present this, give our recommendation, say this is what we're looking for, and hopefully, if they're on board, get consensus from them that this is the right direction to move in. We have a building committee meeting because obviously communication is huge. We have a building committee scheduled for November 9th. We would suggest converting that to a community meeting where we have an opportunity to present this information to the community at large rather than having a typical building committee meeting. The idea would be for town council to send this to town council, to town meeting and referendum at their November 15th meeting. Now, if you remember from the first referendum, once they send it, that triggers the blackout period. So that blackout period would start November 15th with a goal of a proposed referendum on December 8th, which is before the holiday season. And then you would have November 28th, which is 10 days before the proposed town meeting. So in building this and backing everything out, we thought an early December referendum would be better for people to have an opportunity to come out to vote. You also, with that 10 days, you don't want to have the town meeting on New Year's Day or the day after Christmas or Christmas Eve. You know, there's just so many bad days to hold that in the last couple, 3 weeks, first week of the year. So this was the best way to get us there within the 90 days. Just some communication bullet points. After town council, we would like to send out a newsletter, obviously explaining everything to the community, having that community meeting on November 9th. And then like we did the first time, an explanatory text newsletter, which is allowed as long as it's approved by our attorney during that blackout period after the town council sends it to town meeting or referendum. So it's quick, it's definitely aggressive.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So bids are open for 90 days, but we'd be awarding critical packages tonight. Is there any legal risk of doing that, knowing that we still have a referendum possibly about further costs?
What's that? You guys want to help with the risk to, I think the risk for not awarding the critical packages is more. I think
It's large, yeah. We know that we're gonna lose the low bid steel guy, right? So there's $1 million right off the bat that we're gonna have to make up
Right.
during this process, additional PE, cutting the scope if the referendum doesn't pass. But we're also gonna slide the entire schedule if we don't start based on the bid schedule now. So right now, we plan on awarding contracts tonight, hopefully. Having those contracts go out in the next few days and really getting contractors started out on site here by mid-November with some site work and foundations and structural steel. So the project will start pretty much immediately. If we slide off and not award those contracts, the entire schedule is going to slide off. So instead of turning over to school in August of 2024, it's going to be probably mid-year of 24, 25.
and we're authorized to spend that 135.6 already. So the
Correct.
project
Correct.
is
We'll
moving.
build the high
as
school for
scheduled.
the amount that was appropriated. It just may not be the entire, might not be everything that was originally promised in the
So
initial.
what would we cut with the outside those contracts though, since we're looking into the contract, right?
Not necessarily, because if we're talking about the site contract, if we were mentioning that the Monty is taking that out, it would just be a negotiation after the fact. It's
Okay.
work that's not scheduled for a year or two, so it's not gonna hurt the
Okay.
schedule at all. But it'll just have to be a negotiation at that point, that's right.
It would be a reduction of a scope and a deduct change order to their contract.
Correct.
One of your question included, what's the legal, there's no legal risk.
Okay.
There's no violation of protocol or procedures. The project always was gonna award these packages early. We set that stage many meetings ago as how the schedule would be maintained. It would just focus the cost reductions in the areas that we're not proceeding on, and we wouldn't be proceeding on the alternates either way.
Right.
So the alternates aren't being released with this early package, only the base one. So we're not violating protocol, procedure, or what the committee is authorized us to do.
Or I think maybe, Sarah, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but even the contract itself, I think, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of what I think that's the question, is but the contracts are built around, it's okay if if the scope of work is reduced,
Right.
even after we,
Correct.
is it, right, is that part of it? 'Cause
Yeah,
I'm trying to
that-
think like
that-
based on what,
yeah.
making sure that we're not doing something that's
Right, I didn't want
after
us
the
to
fact.
be committing to something that then we just simply can't pay for. I mean, I'm
Well-
assuming you won't review that, but I just wanted to understand.
Yeah, sure, that's a good question.
So again, we know that we can in option 1 and 2, it's just not preferred. Right, so we have to go back and look at the contracts we're talking about tonight and look for some scope reductions there. And then we'd have to look at the other ones that are still out there. And do that and try and find a way to save some money, to spread that out, so, you know, to be able to get it done.
But you could still award those contracts and have those conversations after.
Without there being a risk. That's a good question, Sheila. The contract's contract, right? It's a little bit different in this perspective. All right, any other questions or thoughts? I think so too. So that's all the information we have to date. The options we have in front of us, some thinking around them, just to kind of help guide the conversation. So I'm more than, I would love to hear if there's other thoughts, comments, something that you think we haven't discussed yet or consideration that we need to put out there. You know, I'm more than willing to express my opinion first on what I think might be our best option here, but, you know, I certainly want to make sure we have that discussion as a committee and are comfortable with that moving forward, so that we understand what recommendation we're going to put forward to town council. So any questions or thoughts?
None of them are that.
That's very good.
It's, you know, we've been looking at this over the last few days, the numbers have been coming in real fast. And you know, I kind of try to boil it down and simplify it, and we could either, you know, start cutting stuff that gets into problematic stuff, or doesn't look like the building we had, you know, that the community had accepted, you know, on the original referendum, or we could take a chance at going to referendum and getting, not going through that extra additional, and I need the 4th time of cutting, and then potentially get some of those other ones back. And, you know, when you start talking about tennis courts, the town's not gonna allow to just evaporate the tennis courts. We're gonna have to go back and put it in our capital budget. We're gonna be doing site work after the fact when everything is buttoned up, which is only gonna cost us more. Some of the site work they're doing now is planning for those tennis courts, and that's just one example. And then, and so, you know, either we start cutting now, or we go to referendum and take a chance that we don't have to go down that road. And I think timing wise, the professionals are, you know more than we do, but there's opportunities to dive into this if worst case that referendum doesn't go forward. And I'll say that, you know, I was fairly public about saying I would never go through a 3rd referendum. After the first one failed, and I said, if the second one fails, I'm out completely. And here I am, talking about going to a 3rd referendum. So, what are you gonna do?
And
That's the gist of it.
yeah, I think that sentiment is exactly right. None of these are easy options. You know, I think I'm very similar to you, Johnny. It's, for me, I think it does make sense for us at this point to recommend going forward for a referendum to ask for additional dollars from the community and understanding where we are and the impacts and what it means to the project. And I think there's a lot of communication. I think we made a lot of the points here, but I think we can also do a lot of work to make sure that communication is really clear and transparent for the community as well. And, you know, I think we've reached the same conclusion, we hope, based on the information we provide. But that's kind of my feelings on when I really look and evaluate the options we have in front of us. I don't know if anybody else has any other.
I would just like to say, I think, having looked at this for a while, that I think this is your best option. Option 3, going to a referendum. I think people understand what's going on in the marketplace. And I think they will be, they want what they want, a building that will stand the test of time. If you don't ask them, you'll never know. Ask and see what they think. And hopefully they will be of the same mind. If they say no, we'll have to sharpen our pencils, revisit all of those value engineering items that were previously found unacceptable and rejected, and look at that again. Or for some costs, as you said, you're going to miss out on the reimbursement, but you're not going to, you can't skip them. So I think this is the best option. This is your last chance to ask one more time of the public to support this project. There may be people out there in the public who think, well, why don't they just redesign? That means stopping the process completely and waiting for another 8 months. And during that time, the escalation is only going to make matters worse. You're never going to come back to redesigning this project for the square footage that you need, that you promised you would deliver by redesigning. It's just not achievable. So I think this is your best option.
Yeah, and I think there'll be a lot of work that could go into the communications of this, and really the town voted for a net town share that will ultimately be, even as a result of this referendum, would still be lower than what they voted on to begin with. And I think that will be a big sell.
I'll just say, I agree. I don't love the other idea of going another referendum either at all. But I think we need to give people that option. I think there's gonna have to be very specific communication, because I don't think everyone understands how reimbursement works and what that really means. So that's gonna have to be explained really well. I think Suraj had a good point of explaining to, we have to be specific about the impacts it would have on the current design that we had and what we'd be losing out on and what we've already lost out on and what those alternates are that we just don't have. And I don't think people do know that. So it's a lot to do in a very short period of time, but I do think it's our best option.
And one thing around that communication, if the referendum recommendation is made tonight and we go to town council with that next week, our finance director, Joe Swecky, is working on updating that financial forecast that we used before referendum to see where we're at, slotting in whatever that amount is, if that's decided, and kind of seeing how things have changed since 2021 when we created that. So that's going to be a huge communication tool, because this one is not so much about the scope. We want to bring the scope back to what it was. The messaging is going to be all about the cost.
The other one that kind of, I'm the blackout period, which is something we experienced, but a big part of the success of the referendum was who could continue to communicate about the need for a referendum, in this case, make up for the market escalated costs. But so I hope we have our community partners, our people out there that did such a good job to bring it forward and get people educated and kind of continue that one longer as a committee. I think that we're really important part of our communication plan. It was very critical for the first number rolled out into it's a good thing, and it's a big part of the success.
Meg, I'd share that, as others have, that I think people in Farmington recognize that the economic conditions that we're in right now are not the same as they were 2 years ago. This building committee has recognized that and been good stewards of using the resources that we have to land this project, and have cut out about $10 million out of this project, and yet there's still another $6 million to complete the project that we've already taken things out of. So the other thing that I think people have, the state of Connecticut has demonstrated its responsibility in stepping up and identifying that we live in different economic times, and has brought to the town, independent of our discussion tonight, another $14 million of available reimbursements. And so I think we're certainly on the side of being responsible and recognizing that when someone steps up to say, I get it, there are additional economic constraints on the town. Here are additional resources to address those, that it would be incumbent upon us to exercise using those resources for the purposes that they were intended to offset these increases that we're experiencing right now, and bring this project back to a place where we deliver a school and the resources on that property that are consistent with what we identified when we set out. And I think that the third option is a responsible way of addressing that.
Thank you, Michael. Suraj or Wendy, your thoughts on where we stand?
Echo everybody's comments.
No, I mean, for me, option 3 is the way to go. I mean, option 1, I mean, it's a status quo, and option 2 is, it's no option at all. I mean, and and it makes this interesting. So what good is a project with no little bit of fun and twists and turns? So.
Growth mindset, I think they call that, right? Isn't that how that works? That's a growth mindset. Everything. I love it. Go ahead.
Well, the only thing I would just add is I think the communication part is gonna be your key thing.
Yeah.
And then just, my mind's spinning.
I know, it's hard.
Visualizing what we're gonna do as a committee and subcommittees and how we're gonna push the information, the graphics and the details together. So I agree, option 3, I feel like
I know.
is the best option.
I think absolutely 100% of communication we all acknowledge. As it always seems to be, I think, is the communication is so critical. And but I do think that, we've set some really good standards around that communication. Our transparency, clarity on communications up to this point, I think, hopefully have been super helpful for the community. So I think if we keep that diligence, that we can really represent this in a way that makes the most sense for people. Again, it's always about making sure that they have all the information they need to make an informed decision. That's really what we're doing. And so as long as we keep that mindset, I think that's the best way to approach this. I get all the voting members here, I believe. All right, we're not going to vote like that. Got a little more discussion. We got some next steps after this, but it sounds like to me, in the final motion, we'll talk about what this, using option 3 as our recommendation to the town council moving forward. With knowing that, we do need to talk a little bit more about some detail around that. So what's the first thing they're going to ask us is how much go to referendum for. So let's have a little bit of a conversation around that and what that might look like. So if you remember, one of the pros of option 3 was our ability to be able to not only cover the overage, but also allowing us the opportunity to represent that alternates list that we looked at previously, and hopefully bringing those back in to the project, as well as those tennis courts. So in keeping that in mind, it's important for us to understand what do those dollars look like. And this is a representation of those, the total cost for those alternates. I just want to talk a little bit about what that including markup note each, so everybody's clear.
Just means that there's a bid cost, so the bidders gave their bid, but then when ONG is preparing the guaranteed maximum price, there's the construction phase fee, there's the GMP contingency, our bonds, our insurance, so it kind of gets marked up, gets pulled up. So it's not just the pure trade bid cost, it's that little percentage that we put on is reflected in there. So you as the owner is paying that, not just the bid price.
So we have representation of the total cost here. I want to make sure everybody's clear on what these mean. So total alternate costs, you can see there at 2.58. The total tennis court bid at 1.16, which brings us to a grand total of 3.75. for a total for, this is our alternates and the tennis court, that's what those salaries would look like. Does that make sense to everybody so far? And if you want to kind of look at some of those numbers in more detail too.
Sorry, I think I zoned out a little bit while you were talking.
I'm not offended at all.
Well, I think we're
I know,
going
right?
ahead at the same time. Are those cost estimates, or are they based on bids?
Those are bids.
Okay.
Yeah. And then with that, a little bit of that markup included. So that is what we would pay. The total price. Is that, oh, no, go ahead.
These are recommendations. These aren't all of them.
This is all of our alternates.
Okay.
Yes.
Recommended, there's two that you're not recommending.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm wrong. That's right. That's why you guys are good. Like jump in when I say something wrong. So, okay, go ahead to the next one. Sorry.
So those are the presses that will last for 90 days? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So these were the two additional items that we talked about that we would exclude. So construction of the ball field, and then we had, if you remember, we had, this is still confusing to me, the deduct as an alternate. It's, but
I know.
here we are, and the bottom line is we're not including it, so, but deleting abatement and demolished area deemed existing high school. So this was something that was on our radar all along.
I know, I like to do all ads.
Yeah.
It makes it easier to understand, but at the last minute, the idea of saving some money by demolishing less of the existing high school and doing less abatement work came up. It was the only way to handle it. This is the deduct.
So now you've seen this whole list. Sorry, that's my mistake. The ball fields, yes, is that one?
No, I get it. And
So-
then the rationale, I'm sure was a part of why that's.
Right, exactly.
Both of these items are affected by another project that we don't have answers on.
Right.
Basically what it comes down to. The change of scope is where the deduct comes into play in the field. Where
Right.
if it, whether the community just does or doesn't do it in 1928 would affect that. So
Right.
we can't sit here today and say yes to these. We don't really know if we can.
The ball field doesn't fit in the site plan.
Correct, right.
And it's most, with the 1928, I think Chris said at the last meeting that band room, the current band room is also part of the original, so that would be, hope to be kept, so that makes it bigger and harder to fit. And I think even before that, when it was just the original, it was a tight squeeze with the ball field anyway.
It was tight.
Everybody good so far? So now what we're gonna take a look at is everything on one page. So our base bid amount over budget, as we talked about, the 5.9. The tennis courts at 1.1, and that total alternate amount at 2.5, which puts us at a total amount of $9,684,023. So with that in mind, if we're talking about going to referendum, what we want to do obviously is be able to cover that total amount. So in looking at that, a recommendation might be that we would go back to town council, asking for an additional $9.7 billion to support the project.
To piggyback on what Michael was saying earlier about being stewards and if we go back and we make this project whole the way that we saw it, but we still took a lot of things that we felt were critical along the process. The state of Connecticut has decided to give Farmington an additional 14.7 million. We're not, this isn't, oh, whippy, let's get more money and get more stuff and add it. I don't, what you guys, what we're proposing now is strictly to bring back the project the way we intended it and go to, 9.7 versus the 14.7. Just because it's there doesn't mean we have to spend it. And I think that the project stands for itself by going at the 9.7.
very defensible ask, right? We're going back and saying, this is exactly why we're asking for this salary.
These are based on actual bid numbers,
Actual numbers, right?
no longer estimates.
Thoughts, comments, questions? Anything from Suraj and Michael online?
No, I'm good.
Good as well.
So that actually leads us into actually going ahead and moving forward with our motion. But I just want to make sure one last, is there anything, any thoughts, questions, everybody understand? I think it's pretty clear, to be honest with you. I'm not sure there's much debate to be had about the options, other than what we've done to date and this discussion that we're having tonight. So I just want to make sure everybody understands. If there's any one last question or anything else before we go ahead and move the motion.
Is there a possibility they could come back and say that, just move forward with the 6 million versus the alternate sports?
I mean, I think they would, this is our recommendation to them that they, they would need to approve. So certainly there's an option for them to, ask additional questions, look for further clarification and provide another option for us to consider as well. Yeah, and we will need to, so as we talked about this, so the motion, as you see, will be us deciding as a building committee move forward with the option to referendum, what our recommendation for the dollar amount is. And then if you remember that timeline, we're moving very quickly that the next meeting that Johnny mentioned is next Tuesday. So we would be in front of town council next Tuesday with this recommendation. That's how quickly we're moving on this, because it is important for a lot of reasons that we do that. But we'll need to have, I said, I think the communication work is done around that. I think we can present this same level of thinking and have this really make a lot of sense. How to make a recommendation. All right.
Can I ask, if
Oh,
I
yeah,
may,
go
can
ahead.
I ask if you could show us that timeline again?
Yeah.
I'd like to take a note or take a picture of it, so that I know what those dates are.
There you go.
I've got him, Richard.
Oh,
Have you got it?
did you do a screenshot? Got it.
I wrote it up. Thank you, Michael.
We can send this out. I also have it in a calendar view, and CSG provided a milestone schedule, so we have it in a lot of different.
Thank you. All right, I won't take a picture of it.
Okay, all right, so why don't we move on to the next slide there, Devin? So based on the conversation and discussion tonight, we're going to go ahead and fill in some of these numbers here so that we're all comfortable. So I am going to ask for a motion that says the Farmington High School Building Committee recommends that the town council recharge the Farmington High School Committee to prepare for a second random vote to appropriate $9.7 million in order to utilize the additional $14.7 million in reimbursement from the state of Connecticut to address the overages in the trade packages and alternates as a result of cost escalation and restore the project to what was voted on at referendum by including alternate numbers 1, 2, 3B, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, and the 10 schools. Represents what we all understand tonight.
You want to put that list up there, because you listed them all. We can just
Yeah, we'll read them again.
Read them again. and
You want to
put-
type them in, Devin?
No, not type them in, but
Go to
just.
Oh, go to the
just
list.
have
Oh,
a
I'm sorry.
slide
No,
that's
go this
numbered.
way. Oh, the numbered side.
Yeah, just so we're very clear.
Those are all of them with the next to it. but
You see the thing, so there's where you see wood ceiling is alternate 3B, operational operable wall is 9, ground face block is 5, porcelain tile number 2, operable windows is number 6, the soffits are number 4, the elevator number 10, And horizontal sunshade is number 1. Those were all the add alternates, and then you see the tennis courts down there as well.
So
And the
is
next
that
slide
the
is
form
what's
of a
not.
motion we should
Correct,
second?
yeah,
We
so
should
it's
accept
Kathy's
it,
point,
maybe go to the next slide. And
just
that's
to make sure everybody's clear, this is what's not included in the motion. All right, so get that motion.
Right, the numbers out fast enough.
It's everything with 7 and 8.
All right.
I knew I was skipping numbers somewhere.
So put the motion back on.
All right, so I need to, can somebody make that motion for me?
Motion.
Go ahead.
Go for it, you can read the whole thing.
Well, I guess I only had just one comment to address the overages and trade packages and alternates. I just want to make sure it doesn't sound like it's overage and alternates too, because it's like coverage overages. My grammar's not that great, by the way, but it's just.
Oh, she's saying if we're not implying that there's overages in the alternate.
Correct.
The way it's stated.
The way,
overages
the
in
order
trade
of it.
packages
And I know that the
and
overages are,
alternates.
yeah, I know that
as well as well.
Yeah,
As
you
well
can say
as.
as well as.
as well as alternate, yeah.
Yeah,
Just
so
sorry,
like
just
edit
that small
the-
detail, but
Yeah.
just want to make sure people aren't thinking that there's an overage on alternates too, that it's an overage on the actual. trade
Correct.
package. And then I'll motion. Unless Johnny has something.
No, I was gonna just read the whole thing from scratch, so that.
Did you-
make
did you do
it
that
in a
as well
formal
as?
motion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as well as.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom. Do it.
I make a motion that the Farmington High School Building Committee recommends that the town council recharge the Farmington High School Committee to prepare for a second referendum vote to appropriate 9.7 million in order to utilize the additional 14.7 million in reimbursement from the state of Connecticut to address the overages in the trade packages as well as alternates as a result of cost escalation, and restore the project to what it was voted on at referendum by including alternate numbers 1, 2, 3B, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, and the tennis courts.
Sorry.
It's
a very long. Did you second?
Second.
Okay, Sarah. All right, I'm going to ask for any further discussion before we vote. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? We are unanimously passed. Okay. Thank you. We still have a little bit more business to do, but I do want to thank everybody for having a conversation and really, understanding implications, next steps, and then we have some work ahead of us, but I think, this is really the right decision for the project moving forward. So I do appreciate everybody asking questions and making sure we're all in understanding and agreement there. Okay, so we have one other order of business for us to take, well, that's not true. Some minor stuff, scheduling stuff to take care of, but we have another item in new business that we need to talk about. So could I have a motion to approve the award of the following critical trade packages at their respective base bid amounts? And Devin has the numbers up here as well as the descriptions for us to review. I'm going to read the note just so we have all the information ahead of us. So the critical trade packages were opened at 2 p.m. on October 6th. Since the bid opening, our professional partners have conducted scope reviews on each of the contractors and verified that the base bids amounts are consistent with the required specifications from the bid documents. Attached is an award summary of the qualified low bidder for each of the critical trade packages, and this includes general trades for the new high school. This motion is to approve the base bid amount for each of these contracts. Alternates will be reported with the remaining bid packages. So that's kind of was our earlier conversation that we were having. It is the recommendation of our professional partners that the committee approve the critical trade packages, as many have long lead times for supplies, and approval will maintain the project construction timeline. And we did have the scope award letters included in our packets as well. All right, so could I have that motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
any additional conversation on this one? I think we've kind of served this up in a way that people understand why we need to do this tonight from a criticality for timeline, and what that means to the project overall, but I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that, and understands why we're making this decision this evening. Move forward on this. Everybody good, comfortable with that? Yes.
Yes.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have unanimously passed. So you guys have what you need to move forward on that. Thank you, everyone. So we're just going to move on to just to kind of sort some scheduling other business. So based on our conversations tonight, the timeline that we've seen that is so tight based on moving forward on referendum, I'm going to actually ask for a motion to cancel the 10/20 meeting. So that's our meeting that we had previously put on the schedule for tomorrow night. We put that on there just in case we needed further conversation or discussion. I believe we've met all the requirements this evening, so no requirement for us to meet tomorrow. So could I have a motion to cancel the 10/20 building committee meeting? Motion. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And then we're also going to talk about a motion for, it's a meeting coming up. So could I have a motion to cancel the 10/26 building committee meeting? So that's the building committee we actually already had on the schedule for next week. Based on the conversation or our decisions this evening, what we thought made more sense was for us to keep communications on the agenda for next week, so that meeting will not be canceled. And if we need to extend additional time communications, as we have all noted tonight, that's going to be an important part of our next step. So it would be canceling this meeting, but keeping the 4 o'clock communications meeting on the schedule. Make sense to everybody? So if I have a motion to cancel the 10/26 building committee meeting. Motion. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Motion. Second. Discussions. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we will adjourn at 6:34.
Starting in November.
Thank you, everybody.
Good job.
Bring the noise.